With Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Sony is looking to expand their spider web, opening up new possibilities for our favorite wall crawler and the many iterations of the character in the form of animation. Has the team at Sony Animation succeeded and crafted one of the best Spider-Man films to date? My thoughts on the film coming up. What is up, everyone, and welcome to Men vs. Movies. I'm Griffin. As always, if this is your first time checking out one of our videos, consider hitting that subscribe button where we take on the best and worst of cinema on a weekly basis. Spider-Verse is directed by Bob Persichetti, Rodney Rothman, and Peter Ramsey, and it's also produced by Phil Lord, who also wrote the script, and Chris Miller. With an all-star voice cast consisting of Shameik Moore, Jake Johnson, Haley Steinfeld, Nicolas Cage, John Mulaney, and many others, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse tells the story of Miles Morales after he's bitten by a radioactive spider that transforms him into Spider-Man. Meanwhile, the Kingpin opens up a portal to other dimensions, letting in the likes of Elseworld Peter Parker, Spider-Gwen, Penny Parker, Spider-Man Noir, and yes, Spider-Ham. Still getting acclimated to his newfound powers, Miles must learn to become the hero the city needs and team up with the rest of the Spider People in order to stop Kingpin and return everyone to their original dimensions. That's really just the tip of the iceberg here in terms of the story, and if that sounds like a lot, you're right. And yet, what Phil Lord and the three directors managed to do is hone in on Miles Morales and maintain focus on that character for the entirety of the film. This could have very easily been a mess with so many characters, villains, spider people, and visual flair, but it isn't. Spider-Verse belongs to Miles, and it's his journey that's at the heart of the film and why, as a whole, is so effective. We experience Miles balancing the academic rigor of transferring to a new private school and demanding home life with trying to figure out who he wants to be, confiding only in his uncle, who he's very close with, but who doesn't necessarily have the cleanest record to his name. And matters only get more challenging for Miles after he discovers that he has superpowers, as his dad's a police officer who is very much against the idea of vigilantes. And so watching Miles grow as a person, learn from the likes of Peter Parker, Gwen Stacy, and the rest of the Spider People, and eventually overcome those obstacles that he's faced with is incredibly powerful, emotionally resonant, and by the time that he dons that classic black and red spider suit, it's such sweet payoff. It sure helps that Shameik Moore is also giving an excellent vocal performance, completely embodying the Miles Morales that we know and love from the comics. But while Miles is certainly the focal point of the narrative, Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy are both presented with equally compelling arcs that are beautifully intertwined with Miles's. This Peter Parker isn't necessarily the Peter Parker that we all know and love. He's much older, cynical, and definitely has some personal demons of his own. Yet, throughout the course of Spider-Verse, is able to find hope and optimism through his relationship with Miles. And likewise, Miles is able to learn what it takes to be Spider-Man through his relationship with Peter. As for Jake Johnson, he's also excellent and definitely excels in the more comedic moments, but for someone who has such a recognizable voice, I truthfully did not hear Jake Johnson. He became Peter Parker, something I was a little hesitant of going into this film. Haley Steinfeld's Spider-Gwen was great, and I loved how, because her and Miles were similar in age, they were able to bond and relate a bit more. Their friendship is certainly sweet, but probably the most powerful aspect of her character is how she's able to help Peter overcome a dark, emotional insecurity that ultimately led to the derailment of his life. I won't dive into too much detail on that, but the two share a paralleled tragedy that allows them to connect beautifully. I think what also lends to the compelling nature of these arcs is how all of the characters genuinely feel like real people, and in that regard, Spider-Verse is remarkably grounded in its approach, even when we have all of these outlandish elements such as the interdimensional travel and, yes,
it can get weirder.
Speaking of Spider-Ham, I think it's time we touch on some serious scene stealers here. John Mulaney as a Looney Tune version of Spider-Man is a legitimate stroke of genius, and will have many audiences in stitches with his absurd dialogue that's really brought to life by Mulaney's delivery. And although he isn't in the film too much, he's used just the right amount. While Spider-Ham is sure to be an audience favorite, the real standout for me was Nicolas Cage as Spider-Man Noir. Oh my God, Nicolas Cage was an absolute riot and had me in tears multiple times. The character is so cartoonishly ripped out of the 1940s, and Cage so cleverly adjusts his voice to fit the time period. Just wait for the line where he talks about mugging Nazis. It's incredible. Out of all the characters introduced in this film, I am craving a Nicolas Cage-led Spider-Man noir film. The potential is huge. Sony, I know you're thinking it, so make it happen. Come on. Let's talk about by far one of the most impressive traits this film has to offer, and that is some breathtaking animation. In a year where Pixar made the fabric on Mr. Incredible's shirt look photorealistic, it's insane that the animation style I'm left thinking about is in Spider-Verse. I can legitimately say this is the first real time I've seen literal panels lifted out of the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book and brought to life on the big screen. It is a marvel to behold, let me tell you. The stylish halftones integrated with vibrant colors and typical comic book attributes give this film a wholly original look that makes you feel as though you're reading a Spider-Man comic. Not to mention, this choice really lends to some exciting action set pieces and swinging sequences that are by far some of the best the Spider-Man character has ever seen on the big screen. And I also gotta give my man Daniel Pemberton some love here, as he's crafted an incredible score that's driving, emotional, modern, and so fittingly enhances the journey of Miles. Seriously, I'm convinced Pemberton can score just about anything at this point, since all of his endeavors never cease to impress me. On top of the comic book style we have going on here, the filmmakers do a great job of bringing to life the city of New York, and more specifically, Brooklyn. Many of the street level scenes have a very real feel to them, even if they are animated, which isn't necessarily the easiest thing to pull off, yet Spider-Verse excels at it. Before I give you my final verdict on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, why don't you take a second here and like this video, share with your friends, and subscribe to this channel for more movie reviews and movie-related content on a weekly basis. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, if you can believe it, exceeded my already high expectations and delivered one of the most emotionally resonant, fun, and true iterations of the character we've ever seen on the big screen. Filled with a lot of heart, great humor that's both clever and self-aware, and exciting visuals that will astonish to no end, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is not only the family film to see this holiday season, but ranks as one of the best Spider-Man films ever made. And for all of these reasons and the reasons I've mentioned throughout my review, I'm ultimately going to be giving Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse supercharged. And now I want to hear from you all. I want to know your ranking of the Spider-Man films down in the comments section below. You can include Into the Spider-Verse if you've seen it. And if you have seen Into the Spider-Verse, be sure to let me know your thoughts and opinions down there as well. As always, guys, you can like Men vs. Movies on Facebook, follow us on Twitter simply by searching Men vs. Movies. And lastly, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, that's going to do it for this review, guys. And until next time, take care.